Morning, everyone. We'll give it a few minutes while folks trickle in. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Michelle.
Who is that?
Kendra.
Hi, Kendra. How are you?
I'm fine.
So good to see you. I actually can't see you. I've got way too many boxes open on my screen, but
I understand. I was trying to figure out how to do it myself. So
yeah, thanks for being here.
yes.
Hey, Kendra.
Hi, dear.
All right, Lane, we've got about 20 participants in, so feel free to kick off whenever you feel
Yeah,
good.
we can get started. Yeah, thank you guys for being here today. We realized we scheduled this on voting day, so we're hoping to get done a little earlier and everyone can go vote today. But thank you guys. We're really excited to have AARP join us today to talk about building age-friendly communities. My name is Lane Ferguson. I'm the Young Leaders Chair for ULI Oklahoma. I've gotten to be a part of ULI the past few years. And as you can tell, it's been a crazy year of trying to do programming, but it's given us really cool opportunities to get to reach out to people doing great things for communities and cities around the nation and getting them involved with ULI Oklahoma. The mission of Urban Land Institute is to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. And that's our goal here today as well. We would like to thank our sponsors who are making today and all of our events possible. We're also including our Tulsa sponsors today who are we've invited to be a part of this as well, as we're including AARP, who does services statewide for all of Oklahoma. Some local events that we want you guys to be aware of and sign up for that are live on our website. We have a CPACE Financing for Energy Enhancement event coming up, as well as an in-person site tour at Bank First for members only. You can sign up for a time slot for that and get to go see the enhancements that are happening to Bank First, as well as a My ULI breakfast orientation for new members of ULI. Some national events that we are also joining in are the Housing Opportunity Conference on March 16th and 17th, and the Blueprint for Green Real Estate series. So today, just to let everyone know, this session will be recorded, and so we'll be posting that later if there's things that you guys want to go back and see, that we'll have this recorded for you. If you have a question that you want to put in the chat box, we'll make sure that our speakers get to them, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end of the session where everyone can come off of mute, and you'll be able to ask any questions to the speakers today. I want to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Danielle Aragoni, who's the director of AARP Livable Communities, where she supports AARP's 53 state offices and over 500 localities that have enrolled in the AARP network of age-friendly communities to create great places for people of all ages. Danielle leads the team responsible for supporting age-friendly network members, developing free practitioner-focused publications on topics ranging from ADUs to placemaking to rural livability, and delivering direct technical assistance to nearly 100 communities each year. Next, we have Joy McGill, who serves as the Associate State Director for Community Outreach for AARP Oklahoma. In this role, she drives AARP's local presence and outreach to serve Oklahomans age 50 plus and enhance their quality of life through the aging process through programming that supports fraud prevention, caregiving, livable communities, food security, and veteran engagement. And last but not least, we have Michelle Sourjohn, who currently serves as the AARP Oklahoma's Associate State Director for Community Outreach, where she focuses on enhancing the quality of life for all Oklahomans as we engage in the areas of Native American outreach, caregiving, hunger, livable communities, transportation, financial asset protection, fraud prevention, and encore entrepreneurship. So I would like to pass it over to our speakers. Thanks for being with us today, guys.
Thanks, Lane. We're really happy to be here. I'm particularly happy to be there. I think the only one on the call who's not in Oklahoma, so it's a nice little virtual trip for me to your state. I understand it's extremely cold there today, so stay bundled up, stay warm and safe. But I'm really glad to be a part of this meeting today. I'll kick us off and kind of give a little bit of a perspective from the national point of view where I sit. I'm based in the DC office, and then I'll turn it over to my AARP Oklahoma colleagues. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. Hopefully, this will stop other people sharing. Give me a second as this gets going. But really the purpose of today's talk is just to give you kind of an overview of what AARP is doing in this space. I think oftentimes people have the sense that they know who AARP is, and we like to say that there's probably a few things you don't know about AARP. And one of those, I think, particularly of interest to this group is going to be the ways in which we support livable communities. So I'll quickly give kind of an overview of that and some of like our rationale and our call to action, I guess, if you will. And then again, we'll hear from how this kind of, is shaping communities in Oklahoma in real time. So what we always start with, what I always start with is this slide, because it really presents kind of the demographic urgency of this work. It kind of really, in a nutshell, I think explains why AARP cares about communities. It's because in the year 2034, we will be comprised, excuse me, as a country of more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18 for the first time ever. In Oklahoma as well, the growth population of the group of folks 60 and above has increased significantly in recent years. And that is happening all across our country. And it really begs the question, when you think about how communities are functioning now from a housing, transportation, and public space perspective, the question, I think it's fair to ask, are we ready for that future? And arguably, I think what I often say is we're not. When you look at some of the statistics from around the country, there's certainly reason to believe that our communities are not designed with the needs of older people in mind. When you think about, I'll skip over to transportation here, the top right, because we'll focus on housing in just a minute. We know that older adults outlive their ability to drive by anywhere from 7 to 10 years. We know that our transit systems are in crisis right now, and that bike and ped fatalities are on the rise, and older adults are disproportionately impacted by those traffic fatalities, those rates. When you think about parks and public spaces, we know that older adults don't utilize parks in the same proportion that they represent of the population. And we also know that parks are not equitably distributed, and that particularly in areas that are underserved with parks, that can lead to health effects for the people who live them. And again, more acute effects for older adults. We'll talk about housing in a second, but the built environment really drives how connected we are to others. We know that isolation and loneliness present very real health risks, equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, is the statistics that we've often referred to when you think about prolonged isolation and loneliness, and that isolation really leads to mental health issues as well. And digging a little bit deeper on the housing side, we frankly know that housing does not fit our needs. Not only are people more rent burdened than they used to be, we also know that the housing supply doesn't match who we are as a demographic future. And I'll have a little bit more detail on that in a moment. So why is that the case? I think, on this call, I understand it's planners, it's builders, it's designers, it's architects and the like. You all know as well as I do that codes often inhibit the production of smaller and more flexible housing. That housing quality and access to transportation are just as important as affordability. We already have an affordability crisis, but equally important is how connected is our housing to transportation options that make it a viable place to live. We know that there aren't many incentives for people to modify their homes now to address their future needs. It's a cumbersome process, it's a confusing process, and yet there's an undersupply in the market of housing that is suitable and adaptable to folks who undergo very significant physical abilities, changes to their abilities, and particularly as they age, but not limited to people who are aging. And certainly we know that kind of our business as usual approach to housing is not matching our changing needs. It's not delivering the kind of housing design that we need. It's not delivering the housing size and affordability that we need. And so there's a lot that can be done in the housing space. So that kind of gets us to why we do what we do. And our approach really is to be able to work with local leaders like yourselves and others to help you think about your communities in a different way. We want to help you think about your housing, your transportation, your public spaces with an age-friendly lens. How do we use every policy decision, every programmatic investment, every infrastructure, bond referendum to really create places that are going to be great places for people of all ages. We do that in a few different ways that I'll sort of quickly touch on in the course of the next few minutes. One, we offer a framework for age-friendly policy and investment, which is our age-friendly network. Two, we offer grants, which you'll hear about from me and from Joy as well. Tools and resources for local leaders, you'll hear about from all three of us as well. And then I think the most important thing to take away is that there are AARP state volunteers in every state, including in Oklahoma, available to help you. So very quickly, what is our age-friendly, what is this age-friendly framework that we speak of? So we offer something called the age-friendly network of age-friendly states, AARP network of age-friendly states and communities. There are now more than 500 communities enrolled in this network. And what that means is that these localities have looked at some of those statistics that I showed up top and said, we're not ready and we're going to do something about it. They are invited in, it's a purely voluntary effort, to undergo a 5-year process that begins really with listening to the needs of older adults and then mapping those needs against these 8 domains that you see illustrated here. The top 3 are very familiar to you all. It's housing, it's outdoor spaces, it's transportation, but it's also digging in on what is it that older adults need with regards to how they're involved in social activities, how they're getting their information and how we're communicating with them. How are they able to access employment or volunteerism or civic life? All of those things become kind of the screen and the filter through which communities design a plan for themselves in the form of an action plan. Again, it's a 5-year process. Right now we have about 100 million people who live in communities that are working to become more age-friendly. I will say Oklahoma is one of the very few states where there is no community yet who has sort of joined in our network. So we hope that that changes. But if you're curious to get a handle on what other communities are doing, what some of the impacts have been as a result of their efforts, I would encourage you to check out the MAP website that I've listed here, livablemap.aarp.org, which lets you search by keyword or by population size, by state. But we also have a lot of information on our website. I will say that the range of size of community varies hugely here. We have everything from the county of LA with millions of people to small towns of just a couple hundred. So this framework is really a very flexible one, but again, it's a mechanism through which communities can better prepare for that demographic future. Another way in which we support communities is through our Community Challenge Grant Program. And this meeting together today is really timely because this challenge program is about to enter its 5th year of funding. That window opens in just about a week. February 17th is when we open our next challenge window for application. To date, we've awarded about $6 million to almost 600 communities around the country in every state. And that tends to be focused in things that really affect change in the built environment, particularly in public spaces and placemaking. So these are small, quick action grants that we fund in communities to really demonstrate the value of longer term change. So again, if you're thinking about local leaders who are trying to make a case for, changing the way the pedestrian environment is designed, or making the case that bikes actually do fit in a community, or trying to make the case about how a disinvested, park or abandoned parking lot or, vacant lot could be reimagined and serve as a hub for civic life. This is the program for you. A few, photographs from across the country here. We've, again, made these grants in every state. You'll hear about a few that have happened there in Oklahoma in a few minutes. But this is a great way to, again, catalyze change. We really envision these are quick action grants where we're building the momentum, we're making the case, we're demonstrating what's possible. So again, look for more information on that starting February 17th, and we hope that you're encouraged to submit applications this year. Again, a great way to involve people in placemaking and decision-making, changing the way we think about public space and more. And I will say that in this last year, we've seen some really creative solutions with regards to COVID-19 response as well. So more on that to come in a few minutes. So I want to kind of dig in on housing and really make the case for why housing matters so much. So we did a survey a few years ago to understand what is it that older adults need. If we know that we are not quite ready for this demographic future, what is it that we should be thinking about when we're designing housing? We learned that well, we were reminded that people really want to be able to age in place. More than 3/4 of people age 50 and above want to be able to age in their home and in their community. It's where they've lived most of their lives, perhaps. It's where they have their friends and family. And yet we know that less than half believe they'll be able to stay in their home and never move. And that really, I think, is the most glaring case to be made for the fact that help is needed, support is needed in this space. We know a few more things about housing too, that most people who own their homes, major modifications are needed. In fact, for those homeowners, many of them say that major modifications will be needed to the bathrooms or to entryway, such as how you get in the front door, or even to the lighting or where your bedroom is situated or how it's designed. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done within the home to make it more suitable to age in place. But we also know that there's a community response as well. That in fact, if we are working to create more housing options, then people have the possibility or the opportunity to move to a different home in their community and have their needs met as they change. So what are some of the strategies that we have been focused on to help communities? One is we're really on this topic, we're really trying to help communities and people modify their existing homes to create a better fit for themselves. I apologize, the ordering of these bullets. We just recently did an update to our home fit guide, which includes more than 150 tips for how a person can make modifications to their home, whether they own or whether they rent, and whether they live in a house or a manufactured home or an apartment. It includes a lot of different sort of, in some cases, very low cost or no cost solutions. In some cases, it includes ones that would require fairly extensive renovation, but nevertheless, it's meant to sort of begin people down that process of modifying their home before they need radical change, before they need massive change. We also designed to be as inclusive as possible. So we've translated into a number of languages, and we've also included new information on how smart home tech can help people age in place. This guide is available upon request in PDF or in print form. All you have to do is go to aarp.org/homefit. And I'll give you a quick peek into the guide on the inside. It's a very visual kind of guided room by room guide to small changes. And again, it's everything that might make logical sense, like securing the cords that you use to plug in your iPhone at night, to making sure that those area rugs are secured with double-sided tape. And if you can't secure them, ditch them, get rid of them. But it's also more significant issues as well when it gets into kitchen design and bathroom design. We talk about doorway widths, we talk about entryways. So there's a lot of strategies throughout this document in every room of the home, including the perimeter of the home, that can help people think about how to make their place a better fit. I will say one of the very intentional things that we did here too is it's not just about aging. We know that any day of any week, one of us could, fall off the curb and break an ankle and be on crutches for a few days. Or you might have someone visiting who is in a wheelchair or pushing a baby stroller. Oftentimes the same solutions work for all of those folks. So we're really trying to make homes as all age friendly and as all abilities friendly as possible. Another strategy we talk about with regards to housing is accessory dwelling units. So these ADUs, otherwise, historically known as sort of granny flats or in-law units or carriage homes. I mean, there's a million names for these things. They exist in all parts of the country. For many, many decades, they were part and parcel of how communities were built. But as you know, in the last, 50, 60, 70 years, for the most part, they've been outlawed. But we know that ADUs represent a really important solution for older adults for reasons I'll get into in a minute. And one of the things that we're doing in our AARP state offices is working with localities to put in place codes that would allow ADUs to be built. So this ABCs of ADUs guide was released a couple of years ago. It makes the case for how and why ADUs fit in a community. It gives case studies of what they look like once they're designed and situated, and really why they so beautifully address the needs of many older adults or many people who are looking to have older adults live with them. I think these days, particularly on the heels of COVID-19, we saw families scurrying for solutions to get their loved ones out of nursing homes where they were at greater risk. But oftentimes the solution wasn't available to them. There were not the kind of alternatives in a community that folks sought. So we're actually seeing a slight uptick in interest in accessory dwelling units in which a family could build an attached or detached independent unit for their aging parent, for the person they're taking care of, or for someone who was looking to stay out of a nursing home or stay out of an assisted living facility. An ADU can be a place where a caregiver can live nearby. Lots of good reasons. I will say one of the things I'm really excited about is that we as AARP just released a new model state and local code on ADUs. So again, that's something worth checking out. All of these resources can be found at aarp.org/ADU. And again, just unpacking a little bit about what it is behind the rationale. Why is it that older adults want ADUs? In that same 2018 survey that I mentioned, we asked them, what is it that appeals to you about building an ADU or having an ADU nearby? Overwhelmingly, it was things like having a place for a loved one to stay, or for someone who needs care, to provide a home for family or friends, to have someone living close by and feel more secure, a place for guests to stay, and maybe to earn extra income. So all those things, sort of go back to that notion of creating places where people don't feel isolated and lonely, where people have the means to stay in their home and stay in their community, where they have ready access to the kind of help and support that they need in order to stay in their home. A third strategy that we often talk about is really just the value of the importance of rethinking housing. Again, I apologize for the wacky way in which these bullets are coming out. So we, again, did a guide a couple of years ago that makes the case, that paints a picture of our demographic future. And it explains how there are so many different housing options that are woefully undersupplied in our communities today. This is that missing middle argument that I know that you all have heard about, where we're great at building single family detached, we're great at building multifamily high rise. What we're not so great at building in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years is everything in the middle. Duplexes, triplexes, cottage neighborhoods, things like that. So this Making Room guide goes through lots of different creative solutions that communities have brought to bear to address that need, to address that gap. Recognizing that, more than 50% of our households are one or two people, and yet 85% of our housing stock is 2, 3, 4 or more bedrooms. So again, useful guide to you all as practitioners. I hope that you find value in this and hopefully some inspiration as well. We always want to make the case, this is not just an urban issue. These solutions that we talk about do work in rural places as well. They might look a little different, they might be scaled a little differently, but they all fit and they all work. And to really make that point very, very clear, we issued a couple of years ago something called the Rural Livability Workshop Report. I apologize, it was last year around this time, January. And that kind of maps all the same issues we've been talking about: housing, transportation, public spaces, against a rural lens and in a rural frame. And it makes the case that there are strategies that every community, regardless of size, can put in place to make them a better fit, more suitable for older people. And I will say, what we already know is that in many rural places, they're already at that point where older adults outnumber children. Rural places are often the place where younger folks are leaving and not coming back to. But what we also know is a lot of the strategies that we talk about to make downtowns more vibrant, to offer more housing choice, to offer more transportation options, those are things that appeal to young adults as well. So it can be a mechanism for bringing folks back to a community and creating a more engaging and vibrant community for all ages. The last strategy I'll talk about before I turn it over to my colleagues is just, we have so many tools and resources available for you to use. I hope that you spend a few minutes perusing aarp.org/livable. That is our front door on these issues. So we have free publications, not just the ones I've talked about, but other ones on parks, on how to do a walk audit, on why placemaking. And this is where I'll give a shout out to Lane, who he and his former colleagues at Team Better Block were hugely instrumental in creating this pop-up placemaking toolkit with us a couple of years ago. So many great ideas and resources and images and stories in that that everyone can use in their community. Other tools like the Livability Index gives you a feel right off the bat for how your community is doing, what are the opportunities to improve upon. I mentioned that our searchable map, but one thing I definitely want to make sure that everyone does is subscribe to our weekly newsletter. All you have to do is text livable to 50757. And that'll get you an email newsletter in your box every Wednesday, chock full of lots of information and practitioner-oriented tools. We have about 107,000 local leaders who currently subscribe. This is not your typical AARP newsletter. This is a practitioner-oriented one. And I guarantee that you'll find value in some of the content that you see there. And finally, the slide that kind of kicked off this session, our newest resource is one that I'm really excited about, really proud of. We have been partnering with Congress for New Urbanism for the last couple of years, and I know that CNU is going to be in Oklahoma City virtually soon and in person, hopefully someday soon, to do this guide called Enabling Better Places, an improved handbook for improved neighborhoods. And really what this does is takes their project for code reform and it kind of packages it in ways that make the case for why incremental code change is essential to ensuring that commercial districts and their adjacent areas can be as strong as possible. So we all know that it's not just about helping building owners change what happens inside the building. It's not just about changing what happens in the middle of the streets. It's all the in-between space, how building frontages are designed, where parking goes, what streetscapes look like. All of those things really make a difference in how vibrant communities are. And our goal, our hope is that by using some of the solutions in this guide, communities will be able to implement small changes that are much easier to do than an overhaul of the zoning code. But that really, again, tilt the balance, tilt communities towards that future that is going to be a more age-friendly, more inclusive, more dynamic one. So again, this guide is available for free in print and download, and you can get to it by going to aarp.org/zoning or through our front page there. So with that, I'll stop and I will leave you with some links and hashtags and whatnot to follow up on here, but I'll turn it over to my colleagues at AARP Oklahoma to pick it up from here.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much, Danielle. It's great to see you virtually today and for you to provide all this amazing resource information that AARP and the Livable Communities program has. It's such an honor and it's really exciting to get to work with Danielle and her team on obviously the tremendous amount of resources that the Livable Communities program has rolled out. And it's really great for us in Oklahoma to see the commitment and the resources that are available and the understanding too that the needs that a community or a county like Los Angeles has is totally different than what we have right here in Oklahoma, and the flex that they've made in looking at how livability looks like in a rural space or in smaller communities, and really the contribution it makes it's still just as meaningful, but maybe in a different sort of way. So I will be showing a few things this morning related to the Livable Communities Grant Challenge that's coming up. So let me get my screen shared up for you here and we'll walk through a few things. All right, so as Danielle mentioned, the Grant Challenge does kick off next week, February the 17th. And so here's just some baseline information to kind of talk through what the Grant Challenge looks like. Danielle mentioned it's quick action projects that spark change. So it does a great job of getting your community leaders involved with tangible products that bring residents and leaders together to address the challenges. And the great thing about this Community Grant Challenge is that, especially in the frame of a lot of people think with AARP, it's only focused to people as they age, but really a livable community is one that is livable for all ages. An example of that is if you think about sidewalks that really should be appropriately widened, it's not only for someone who may be on a walker or needing a wheelchair, it's the same wheelchair, same size of sidewalk that someone who's pushing a baby stroller down the sidewalk needs. And so it frames in a way that we look at the ways that our communities are built and changing the way that our public spaces are allocated to make sure that it's really livable for all people. So of course, you know, it focuses on transportation, mobility, bikeability, walkability, and the great opportunities of how we can look at reframing some of those empty parking lots into small park spaces or things that just really overall improve what the community looks like. So I wanted to share just a little bit with you of a few of our local community challenge winners that we've had just recently. What you're seeing here on the screen is one of our most recent grant challenge winners that just wrapped up their grant project in December, and this is Main Street Enid was one of the grant recipients. They did a beautiful job of reinventing a walkway space, or a crosswalk, if you will. It's more than just an average crosswalk, and it really brought a lot of beauty, innovation, and it really transformed and created a really nice opportunity for them to create a better space for their community. And they did a really fantastic job of not only engaging the community partners that were involved with the Main Street program, but they also brought in volunteers of all ages from the community to help with the project and really help them create some ownership in the particular project. A couple of other grant challenge winner examples. You see there the Shawnee Traffic Circle. Shawnee was our very first grant challenge winner when the grant program started several years ago, and they added a traffic circle to help slow the traffic along that particular road and really create a more livable and a safe space for all of the community members. There on the right is the Veneta Breezeway. If you're familiar with the Veneta community, they have highway Route 66 that runs right down their main street, and so they have heavy truck traffic as well as regular car traffic, and it creates a feeling of an unsafe space in which to walk if you're not familiar with the community or uncomfortable with crossing the street. And they did a really beautiful job of taking an alleyway that was largely unused on their main street, which just if you see in the block behind it, that's kind of a cultural district for them behind there. There's a library and a community center and a number of community resources that was a little bit challenging for people to walk to in a very safe way. So they applied for a grant through the Community Grant Challenge and reinvented that walkway, that old alleyway, frankly, to a full-on walkway. They've got park benches, they repaved the street, they engaged the community to put artwork along the walls there on each side. I got to participate in a really nice dinner that they hosted, and they're utilizing it in all sorts of different spaces and putting tables in there and creating really great community engagement opportunities, all with the same frame of figuring out how to make their main street more walkable and in a safer space. So one thing I'll mention before I switch over to the hotspots, if you're thinking about the Community Grant Challenge, do think about what Danielle said. These are quick action projects, and they are in the world of grants, really truly more lower end cost-wise grants. So while many communities really could invest in something that maybe a $250,000 project to totally redo all of their crosswalk lighting and electronics and all of those things. And those are really valuable opportunities. The AARP Community Grant Challenge is not built for that. We're looking at smaller grants that can really make a difference, that are quick action. We've seen great opportunities that across the state that have received grant dollars in terms of community gardens, and being really thoughtful about in the way that the gardens are built, that they have opportunities that are perhaps not something that someone's having to get all the way down on their hands and knees to do the gardening, where someone, if they were in a wheelchair, could roll up to the gardening tables, and really looking at these grant opportunities that make a difference for people of all ages. So a couple of other to share on some work that we're doing in Oklahoma that is in the frame of livable community, hotspot program that we have partnered with Oklahoma State University. So Oklahoma, unfortunately, is one of the least connected states in the nation. We're number 47. So we're pretty much bottom of the barrel. And if you look at a community like Haskell, Oklahoma, they have 1,900 people. Exactly half of their residents have no access at all to internet. And as you think about what life looks like, especially as we've been dealing with life in a pandemic, internet connectivity has been one of the hallmarks of helping people stay connected. And if you think about these individuals, whether they're young or old, maybe with virtual school, they're not able to participate in school-related projects. If they're older, they can't stay connected with anything outside of, the walls of their own home because of isolation and isolating related to the pandemic. So this is something that's really important to AARP as we look at how to help bridge that digital divide and help get access in. So in Oklahoma State University, started a rural hotspot program a number of years ago, and we partnered with them and have started funding hotspots that are available in community libraries in these rural communities. So they check out of the library just like a book would, and library patrons can basically check them out for 2 weeks at a time or whatever the particular library's designated time frame is. So far, we've granted 20 locations from Oklahoma, from AARP Oklahoma. Last year was the first year that we actually also added a focus into one of the tribal libraries with Absentee Shawnee tribe. And so we're really excited about this program. If you're part of one of these rural locations or you're interested in something like this, if you're in a rural location, you can definitely let us know. Our contact information will be at the end. We will be doing this again in 2021 in partnership with Oklahoma State University, and we're really excited. It's a great program. It's making a tremendous impact. Dr. Brian Whitaker from Oklahoma State University is a national thought leader actually in the broadband expansion, and he's been amazing to partnership with, and so we're looking forward to seeing what that looks like for 2021. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Sourjohn, to talk about some other grant opportunities and other spaces in livability that Oklahoma's working on.
Thank you so much. If you do have a project or an idea that you would like to partner on, just feel free to reach out to Joy or myself. We'd love to hear from you. Alongside with the AARP community grants that Danielle and Joy mentioned, we also have the AARP Foundation that may be able to assist you with some grants. Now, these grants are much larger. They're generally multi-year grants. But they support sustainable real-world solutions to challenges facing lower income older adults. So we collaborate with partner organizations to help identify evidence-based projects that really transforms lives and communities. So these are going to be larger grants and multi-year grants that'll be available. Currently, if you go to AARP's Foundation grants page, the database online is not working. However, if you do have a project in mind, just reach out to Joy and myself, and we'll reach out to our foundation staff to see if we can't get something rolling for you. Excuse me, as Danielle mentioned, we recently updated the Home Fit Guide and created new Home Fit resources. We do quite a bit of education throughout the state of Oklahoma. I was super excited to hear Kendra Orcutt's voice on the call today. We have Kendra Orcutt, and also I see Louise Schroeder is also on the call. These individuals, along with myself, we go out through the state of Oklahoma and do Home Fit presentations to local organizations, communities. And so if you would like one of those presentations, please let us know and we can get one scheduled for you. If you would like to become a speaker, we would love to have you. We have presentations that are already put together, newly updated, and also some wonderful resources and handouts that are completely free for your presentations as well. And as a reminder, all of the publications and resources that Danielle mentioned, including the Home Fit Guide, also the walk and the bike audits, and the placemaking guides, no matter what, I mean, if you want 2 or 200 of them, they're completely free. So just let us know, let Joy and I know, and we can get those out to you. They're also available through digital download if you need those as well. If you're doing research, I also encourage you to visit our AARP Livability Index. Danielle touched on that really quickly. The AARP Livability Index really measures the quality of life and in our communities, and it addresses housing, transportation, neighborhood characteristics, environments, health opportunities, even civic and social engagement. I have seen some communities pour in thousands of dollars for their own livable community index survey results, and when they could have just gone to this free online resource and got the same information for free. So please check that out and see if that's useful to you as well. We also have one last thing, our AARP Public Policy Institute that promotes the development of sound creative policies to address our common need for social economic security, healthcare, and quality of life. We have a full library of data, research, and public policies at your fingertips. If you need supporting data for a grant, you can find it there. If you need some additional information for a report, you can find it there. So if you also have a need for a survey or a research project, let's discuss that before you pour some money into it, because we might be able to reach out to our Public Policy Institute as well as our research department to see if there's something we might be able to help you with. Several years ago, we worked with the community market of Pottawatomie County as we embarked on addressing food insecurity in Pottawatomie County, and we were able to provide a county-wide survey to figure out where we stood with hunger and what we needed to do to create policies around those results. So and then also, before we got on, you guys jumped on this call, we were talking about all the different things that we do at AARP. So just as a reminder, there's some other resources out there available to you as we make our communities safe and livable, including our Fraud Watch Network, where we help educate individuals about how to avoid the pitfalls of frauds and scams. Also, we have free tax aid, free driver safety classes, and also family and employer caregiver resources. Again, all those are completely free at no charge, except for the driver safety classes. I think those are there's a little fee to those. But we appreciate you so much, each and every one of you, that you're doing to making our local communities more brighter and livable. And we appreciate you so much. And then also here is Joy and myself's contact information. So feel free to email us or call us, and we'll be happy to help you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We're going to go into question and answer time. I've got a couple questions that were sent to me via chat that I'll read off, but feel free during this time, if you want to take yourself off mute, you can feel free to ask the question yourself too. First question I had is, what is the process for becoming a certified age-friendly community, and who leads that process?
So I'm so glad you asked. That suggests someone's interested, which is great. I would say there's two things. One, we don't certify communities as age-friendly. This is a commitment, and the way that we think of it is this is your community's commitment to become an age-friendly community. It's really a never-ending process. So I don't mean to turn people off to that, but I want to be realistic. This is not a stamp that says you're done, you're certified. The process begins with checking out our website. We have just posted 6 new training modules, one of which orients you very clearly to the program as a whole. It explains what we mean by the 8 domains of livability, and it walks you through every step of the process. So it begins with an application that your community would make. It must be accompanied by a letter from your mayor or a resolution from your council. So we require that the local government is putting their some skin in the game here. We want to see that they're committed to the process as well. But oftentimes it's led by volunteers. It's led by a university, by a chamber of commerce. It could be led by a city department, Department of Aging, Department of Housing, Department of Community Development. It could be led by a nonprofit organization. So the leadership is varied. We are agnostic on who leads, but it's really critical that we do see that local government commitment alongside. Beyond that, once you've applied, the process goes a little bit like this. The first year is spent assessing the needs of your residents. And as Michelle mentioned, we have a lot of pre-existing resource to draw on. We also have a ready-made online survey tool that you could administer to your community members. That then sets off kind of the second year where you're working as a collective group of stakeholders to develop an action plan. What it is you're going to do with what you heard in the survey. How is that going to convert into actual things to do in your community to make it better and be responsive? And then the last 3 years of the program is really about implementing that action plan. So that's a little bit of a rough sketch of how the program works. But again, the first thing to do would be to check out our website. You can go straight to aarp.org/age-friendly. And when you're there, you'll not only see we have a program brochure that describes the program, as well as those videos. Plus, we have a couple different related things on, examples from other communities, what they've been able to achieve through the program.
Awesome. Another question I got, unless someone else has already asked one, is you guys have to have city approval before submitting for the community challenge grant. And so for applicants, do they have to go through the city before they can go through the grant process with you guys?
I'll give a starter answer. The answer is no. I will say the grants typically are awarded to nonprofits or to municipalities. So if you're a nonprofit organization, you're more than welcome to apply independently. If you intend for the city to be the recipient of those funds, then you should affirm that the city will, in fact, wants to play that role. Michelle or Joy, anything to add on that?
The only thing I'd add is if you have something in mind that you are just curious if it falls within kind of the spectrum of kind of what fits on the community grant challenge. We certainly don't want to stifle any innovation, but we're happy to answer any questions, or if you want to ping ideas off of us, or understand what some of the other previous grant winners look like. We're happy to help answer that question, or even do a little bit of troubleshooting.
And on that note, we've had some projects that may have not been funded through the community grant, and we've been able to kind of check some different purses throughout the organization to see if that's something we could fund elsewhere. So, if you have something in mind, please reach out to us, because we may be able to find some funding elsewhere. If not, look for some great community partnerships.
Awesome. A question I was actually kind of thinking through, I think about this every time I get to work with AARP, is, I think when you think of bike lanes and a lot of different urbanism interventions, I think your assumption is that it usually is more in the favor of the millennial generation, and kind of, the younger crowd that wants to move back into the city and do that. But it really is an age-friendly thing to add that livability. How do you guys engage the 50+ generation, and how has it been hard or challenging, or do you see them having an interest in adding things like bike lanes or curb extensions into the built environment?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Lane. That's a personal passion project of mine, is bike lanes and communities and things. I will say, I'll answer that in two ways. One, I think it's not uncommon to hear of stories where older adults come out in objection, right? To fight the introduction of bike lanes in the community. I know that happens here in DC, near where I live. So there is a preconception, to your point, Lane, that this is something that serves younger folks, and that might bring kind of those people into our community, right? So that's a little bit of a dynamic that I think is out there that we need to acknowledge. But the preponderance of evidence that we have is that older adults really recognize that cycling is a very viable solution. We've been working in the last couple of years with the League of American Bicyclists. I'm also on the board there, so I'll divulge that in all honesty. But we've been working with them to do a couple of things. In fact, we just did a webinar with them 2 weeks ago, where they released a new report. They, every few years, as you may know, do a benchmarking report on walking and bicycling in the US. It's not unlike the Dangerous by Design report, but it's focused on walking and biking. There's some great data in there on older adults. That is where we get the statistic that older adults are disproportionately represented in pedestrian fatalities in 35 states. We asked them to scan all the data that they have, to pull out data specific to older adults and cycling. And that data is what constitutes this new report that they just released a couple weeks ago. So if you have any interest in that, you can Google Bike League, older adults, AARP, and you'll find it. But in tandem with that, so a couple of things. One, they've identified in that among the greatest growth in bicycling related fatalities, the biggest group, the two of the largest groups of the sort of fastest growth in those fatalities is older adults. It's between 55 and 65. So clearly older adults are cycling, but older adults are also potentially more vulnerable to traffic fatalities as a result of that. Coupled with that, I think what we've seen in the last several months, certainly with COVID, is that there are more people cycling than ever before. People have kind of rediscovered cycling, particularly when streets are calmer, when there are fewer people driving in them. It kind of opens the pathway up for people to get back on bikes, or to get on bikes for the first time. That, the rapid expansion of e-bikes really has provided a really viable solution for older adults who may have worried that sort of decreasing stamina would be a barrier to them. Biking. We also see things like trikes, adult trikes, that are out there that are becoming more and more popular, along with cargo bikes that, again, just respond to the needs of varying people. For older adults, balance may be an issue. Well, an adult trike suits that need and also provides some storage for grocery shopping. So in that same vein, we were able to partner with League of American Bicycles to do a new training module that will specifically focus on older adult cycling. What are the considerations that communities need to think about to bring older adults back onto bicycles? And then also, what are some of the sort of, again, mechanical solutions that are out there, e-bikes and treks, like things like that. It's a very long-winded way of saying bikes are definitely part of the mobility solution for older adults. And I think they can be increasingly so if we design communities that support that. The great thing about that, it doesn't just benefit older adults, it benefits everyone, because when you're creating a bike lane for one age group, you're creating a bike lane for all age groups. And when you're creating a bike lane, you're also creating a safer pedestrian environment. So the benefits just compound. So big fan of biking. I hope more communities are able to make that possible.
And here in Oklahoma, we've done a couple of walk audits and bike audits utilizing the AARP walk audit booklets. And by the way, those walk audits, they also come with a facilitator's guide. So you don't have to reinvent anything. But AARP, we provided lunch for all the volunteers that came out to participate and actually fill out the walk audits. And they were all ages that came out and participated. So I think for bikeability and walkability, when you can see more people out in your community, I noticed even in my neighborhood, once COVID hit, I saw so many more people walking and biking, and it just really, one, gives you a sense of community because you're actually seeing people in your community, but it also makes you feel safer as well. So I think, for that, for, older adults that maybe aren't, biking, for them to see other people within their neighborhood, it creates that community sense.
Definitely. Looks like, Danielle, you responded to a question earlier. Did you have anything to add to that? The question was, if I can find it one more time.
I can find it here. It says, how do you balance, Charlie asked the question, how do you balance the age and place ideal with the fact that many seniors are in homes that are much too large? And then Charlie subsequently followed up with another question, which I can touch on here. So my answer was, that I think the fact that many people live in homes that are beyond their needs, that are great, larger than their need, certainly require more uptake and care and heating and cooling and repair than perhaps they want to be responsible for. Those are ideal situations to think about how we can modify homes. Whether it's, subdividing part of it into an accessory dwelling unit, if it's permitted in the locality. And again, this goes back to, let's get the codes right. Let's advocate for ADUs to be possible and permissible. So those are ideal situations to subdivide, create an ADU in a home that is too large, convert an attic, convert a basement for a unit that could house someone else. But another solution that we've seen increasingly too is more people are open to home sharing. I didn't touch on this in the slide, even though I had a statistic in there. Something like 60%, I can't remember the statistic now, but something like 60% of people are more open to home sharing than they have been in the past, or there's an increase in appetite for home sharing. And I think that speaks to a few different things. One, the Airbnb, rise, that counts as home sharing. Two, I think we're just more comfortable with the notion of the sharing economy. Granted, there are risks, of course, in days of COVID, but nevertheless, people are increasingly open to that. And there are services like Silver Nest or Nesterly, which are for-profit companies, but also nonprofit models that exist throughout the country that are designed exactly to pair older adults with roommates. And those roommates can either be like-aged roommates, or they can be someone who's younger, college students, young professionals, folks who recently divorced, all kinds of options, wherein that particular connection, that co-housing situation benefits both parties, right? Because maybe the homeowner, the older adult, needs a little bit of help with yard work, and they can rent a room, they can rent part of the house to someone at a reduced rate in exchange for some of those services. So we increasingly see solutions like that coming out. And I will just, give a plug here for Silver Nest, which is, it's a for-profit company, but it has really cracked the nut, I think, on the screening and the safety concerns that people have around bringing a stranger into their home. And they've been very thoughtful in designing an approach that is specifically with the needs of older adults in mind. And they are now, I think, present in all 50 states. So models like that are worth exploring, I think, particularly in those cases. Charlie then followed up with a question on affordable housing is being built in the inner city there in Memphis that doesn't meet the needs of low-income children who often live in large households. Any suggestions on how to address that need? So I would say here too, on the one hand, we have homes that are too large for some people. On the other hand, we're not building the right kind of homes that really account for the needs of multi-generational families. We know that in some cultures, it is tradition to have 3 generations living together, 3 or 4. We also know there's more grandparents raising grandkids than there have been historically. So again, it's incumbent upon, I think, local leaders and builders to be thinking about designing housing that is as flexible as possible, and that same ethos should be brought to bear in what I'm assuming is subsidized affordable housing as well.
That's great. Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a quick question about the newest guide with the partnership with CNU. I know you mentioned that you sometimes work with communities to help with those incremental changes to their development codes. As you know, Oklahoma City is in the process of that. Do you guys take meetings and meet with stakeholder groups, or do you provide consulting directly, or how does that process work?
So typically what we have done is, one thing I didn't get into is kind of how we provide technical assistance to communities. And
Yeah.
typically what we do is we lean on our state offices to sort of identify what are their target communities, what are the communities where they're really working to deliver or see progress towards built environment changes. That might be in a community that's enrolled in our age-friendly network, or it might be one of our community presence sites, as Michelle and Joy would, are familiar with, which are places where AARP is investing more of our resources. But the reality is that once those needs become known from the community level by the AARP state office can then request support from my office, where we'll send out experts to kind of work directly in community. So this year we offer that kind of technical assistance through a number of different organizations. Smart Growth America is one, Team Better Block is another, powered by WGI, powered by Team Better Block, or whatever it is. Lanny could correct me there. Optico's Housing, Trust for Public Land, folks like that, national organizations can be brought in kind of a virtual way to do a talk, to do a little bit of advice, to offer kind of a memo. So that resource is available. I would say it all flows through the AARP state office. So I'll put the hotspot there on Michelle and Joy to follow up on that offline.
Yeah, so definitely let us know. We had a community that was not on our radar, and we actually did one of these same presentations to them to let them know what resources were available. And they said, we're wanting to do a multi-generational event space that where our communities can gather. Do you have anyone that can help us with SWOT analysis? So we did run that up the poll. So we're looking to see if we can get some experts to help lend that community some assistance. So it never hurts to ask, and we definitely will go to bat for you.
Awesome. Any other questions? We will share these slides as well as the resources that were shared today. And then also encourage you to go check out aarp.org/livable. Did I say that right?
Perfect.
And they have all of those things like they just said are on that, as well as the newsletter. It's really great and just has so many resources and so much great information. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope we're going to have a lot of community challenge grants coming in. So hopefully we'll see some quick action stuff happen in 2021. But awesome. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Go vote if you haven't yet.